The Salty Dog Diner had seen its fair share of unusual characters over its 50 years serving the coastal town of Port Haven, but none quite like the woman who walked in at exactly midnight. Dr. Finn O'Connor looked up from his research papers scattered across the worn formica table, his coffee long since gone cold, and found himself unable to look away. She moved with an otherworldly grace, her skin seeming to shimmer with a faint pearlescent quality under the fluorescent lights. Long silver-white hair was pulled back in an intricate braid that seemed to catch light from angles that didn't exist. But it was her eyes that truly captured attention. They were the color of deep ocean trenches, with what appeared to be bioluminescent specks floating in their depths. Probably just another performance artist from the city, Finn muttered to himself, trying to focus back on his marine biology research. The unexplained deep-sea phenomena he'd been tracking for the past 6 months were far more important than a stranger's unusual appearance. This establishment serves sustenance? The woman's voice carried a melodic quality that seemed to ripple through the air. She stood beside his table, head tilted at an angle that was just slightly too sharp to look natural. Yes, Finn found himself answering, gesturing to the empty seat across from him. Would you like to sit? I can show you the menu. That would be acceptable. I am called Naira. She sat with perfect posture, movements precise as a surgeon's. You are a researcher of aquatic ecosystems? Finn blinked, glancing down at his papers. How did you? Your documents contain complex analysis of marine biological systems. She leaned forward, those impossible eyes focusing on his notes. You have observed anomalies in the deep-sea trenches. Warning bells should have been ringing in Finn's head. Instead, he found himself pushing his research toward her. Yes, exactly. Unprecedented bioluminescent patterns and completely new species appearing out of nowhere. It's like nothing we've ever seen before. Perhaps, Naira said carefully, these observations are not as unprecedented as you believe. Before Finn could process that statement, Betty, the night shift waitress, arrived with a fresh pot of coffee. What can I get you, Han? I require. Naira paused, studying the laminated menu with intense focus. This item designated as chocolate milk shake. The combination of proteins, sugars, and flavor compounds appears most efficient for initial sampling. Betty didn't bat an eye, she'd served drunk college students with stranger requests. Sure thing, sweetie. And how about some fries? On the house, you look like you could use a good meal. Something flickered across Naira's face, surprise, confusion, and something else. You would provide additional sustenance without requiring exchange of currency? This is a gift? Just being friendly, Han, Betty smiled and walked away. Naira's posture had gone rigid. This is unexpected. I was not prepared for such a scenario. It's just fries, Finn said, bewildered by her reaction. People do nice things for each other sometimes. In my culture, the offering of sustenance as a gift carries significant meaning. Naira's voice had dropped to barely above a whisper. It indicates a desire for permanent social bonding. Finn laughed, then stopped when he saw her serious expression. Wait, you're not joking? I do not engage in humorous deception. She folded her hands precisely on the table. According to the customs of my people, I am now bound by tradition to consider this establishment and its inhabitants as potential permanent social partners. Your people? Finn's scientific mind began putting pieces together, her unusual appearance, her formal speech patterns, her confusion over simple social customs. Naira, where exactly are you from? She met his gaze steadily. I believe your language would approximate the location as Proxima Centauri b. I am an aquatic systems researcher, much like yourself. Though my mission parameters did not account for becoming culturally entangled with local inhabitants quite so quickly. The chocolate shake arrived, along with a plate of steaming fries. Naira studied them with the same intensity she'd shown his research. Finn watched as she took her first sip of the shake, her eyes widening as bioluminescent specks flared brighter. This sensation, it is overwhelming. She took another sip. How do humans maintain focus with such intense flavor experiences? Finn should have been frightened, should have been running to call authorities or news stations. Instead, he found himself fascinated by her genuine wonder at something as simple as a chocolate shake. We manage somehow. So, want to tell me more about what your people are doing in our oceans? Naira hesitated, then seemed to come to a decision. Given that we are now culturally bound by the offering of sustenance, perhaps full disclosure would be appropriate. She glanced around the empty diner. However, this conversation should not occur in public spaces. I have a research boat docked nearby, Finn offered, surprising himself. Private enough for you? That would be acceptable. Naira stood, movements fluid yet somehow mechanical. But you should understand, by accepting your offer of alternative location, I am now obligated by my customs to share all information about my mission. Are you prepared for that level of knowledge? Finn gathered his research papers, a lifetime of scientific curiosity overwhelming any sensible caution. Lead the way. Neither of them noticed the strange shimmer in the air outside the diner's windows, nor the faint humming that seemed to follow their footsteps toward the marina. The night was about to become much more interesting than either of them had planned. The gentle rocking of Finn's research vessel, the Marine Dreamer, did little to settle his racing thoughts. Naira stood at the bow, her silvery hair catching the moonlight as she stared into the dark waters below. The bioluminescent spots in her eyes pulsed with a rhythm that seemed to match the waves. Your vessel is primitive, she observed, though her tone held no judgment. Yet I sense you've made remarkable discoveries despite your technological limitations. Primitive? Finn couldn't help but feel defensive of his beloved boat. This equipment is state-of-the-art. Naira turned to face him, her movement so fluid it seemed to defy physics. My people have been studying Earth's oceans for 3 centuries. We've watched your species progress from wooden vessels to these. She gestured at his sonar equipment, digital interfaces. Your rate of advancement is unprecedented. 3 centuries? Finn leaned against the railing, trying to process this information. Why haven't you made contact before now? Protocol dictates observation only. Her expression shifted subtly, something like discomfort crossing her features. My current situation is highly irregular. The gift of sustenance has created complications. About that, Finn ran a hand through his salt-sprayed hair. Surely we can just explain that it was a cultural misunderstanding? Betty didn't know she was accidentally proposing some kind of alien friendship pact. Naira's bioluminescent eyes flared briefly. You misunderstand. In my culture, such bonds are not casual matters to be dismissed. They are permanent, sacred. By accepting the gift, I am now bound to protect and share knowledge with this social group until death or dissolution. Death or dissolution? The only ways to break a bond in my culture, she explained. Either through death or a formal dissolution process that requires approval from the High Council. She paused, those impossible eyes fixing on him. However, dissolution is considered deeply shameful. Most choose death. Finn felt the weight of the situation settling over him like a heavy tide. So what exactly does this bond mean? What are you expected to do? I must share all knowledge relevant to the bonded group's survival and advancement. Naira's voice took on a formal tone. Including the true purpose of my mission here. She moved to the ship's computer console, her fingers hovering over the keyboard. A subtle pulse of energy emanated from her hand, and suddenly the screen came alive with data unlike anything Finn had ever seen. 3-dimensional maps of ocean trenches appeared, overlaid with pulsing energy signatures and biological readings that made his years of research look like child's drawings. My people are aquatic in our natural form, she explained, manipulating the displays with subtle gestures. This humanoid appearance is a biological modification for surface interaction. We've established bases in your deepest ocean trenches, studying the compatibility of Earth's marine ecosystems with our own. Compatibility for what? Finn asked, though he suspected he knew the answer. Colonization. Naira's voice softened. Our home world's oceans are dying. We need alternatives for species preservation. Finn stared at the data scrolling across his screen. These energy signatures, they match the anomalies I've been tracking. You've been terraforming our oceans. Preliminary environmental assessment only, she corrected. No permanent modifications have been made. Yet. Yet? Finn felt his scientific excitement giving way to concern. What happens when you move beyond assessment? Naira's posture shifted subtly, tension evident in her perfectly controlled movements. That is where our current situation becomes problematic. My mission was to evaluate Earth's oceans for compatibility and report back. Based on that report, the High Council would decide whether to proceed with full colonization. And if Earth was deemed incompatible? Then measures would be taken to ensure Earth's oceans could not be used by any other spacefaring species. Her voice was carefully neutral. The process would be quick. Humane. Humane? Finn stepped back from her. You're talking about destroying our oceans if they don't suit your needs? I was talking about that possibility, Naira emphasized the past tense. Before the bond was established. Now, such action would violate my cultural obligations to protect bonded social groups. She touched the screen, bringing up new data. These readings suggest Earth's oceans could support both our species with minimal modification. Coexistence is possible. But would your High Council agree to that? Naira's bioluminescent eyes dimmed slightly. They do not know about the bond. When they discover it. She paused, choosing her words carefully. They will not be pleased. A low humming sound filled the air, and Naira's head snapped up, her body tensing like a predator sensing danger. They're here. Who's here? Bond enforcement specialists. Her voice had dropped to a whisper. They monitor for unauthorized cultural exchanges. We must dash. The boat's instruments went dark. A beam of silvery light pierced the night sky, illuminating the vessel. Naira moved with shocking speed, grabbing Finn and pulling him away from the windows. Listen carefully, she hissed, her eyes now pulsing rapidly. What happens in the next few moments will determine the fate of both our species. Do you trust me? I barely know you, Finn protested. Incorrect. You know me better than any being on this planet. The bond ensures truth between us. Her hand gripped his arm, sending small pulses of electric energy through his skin. Do you trust me? Above them, something large was descending from the clouds, its surface reflecting the moonlight like liquid metal. Finn looked into Naira's eyes, seeing fear there, but also something else, hope, perhaps, or determination. Yes, he said, surprising himself with his certainty. I trust you. Then hold on, she said, and before he could ask why, she wrapped her arms around him and dove over the side of the boat, pulling them both into the dark waters below. The last thing Finn saw before the ocean closed over them was Naira's form shifting, becoming something both beautiful and terrifying, her true aquatic self revealed at last. The transformation happened in seconds. As they plunged deeper into the cold waters, Finn felt Naira's form shift against him. Her skin became translucent, revealing intricate patterns of bioluminescence that pulsed in complex rhythms. Webbed membranes extended between elongated fingers, and gills appeared along her neck, rippling in the current. Yet her eyes remained the same, deep ocean trenches filled with living light. What should have been terrifying instead felt strangely familiar to Finn. Years of studying marine life had prepared him for the elegant efficiency of her aquatic form. She was beautiful in the way that all perfectly adapted sea creatures were beautiful. A bubble of something like air surrounded his head, allowing him to breathe and speak. "Your technology, I assume?" he asked, his voice sounding oddly distorted through the field. "Bioengineered atmospheric membrane." Naira's voice resonated directly in his mind, musical and clear. "It will protect you to depths of 3,000 meters. We must reach the research outpost quickly. The enforcement specialists will not follow us to such depths without proper authorization." They descended through layers of increasingly dark water, Naira's bioluminescence providing the only light. Schools of deep-sea creatures, attracted to her biological light display, swirled around them in mesmerizing patterns. Finn recognized species he'd only seen in research papers, along with others that defied classification. "Your presence attracts them," he observed, watching a group of what appeared to be cephalopods with crystalline shells dance through her light trails. "We share common ancestry with many of Earth's marine species," Naira explained as they continued their descent. "My people seeded the early oceans of multiple worlds, including Earth. These creatures recognize our biochemical signatures on an instinctual level." "You're saying you created Earth's marine life? Influenced its evolution? Guided it?" Her mental voice carried a note of pride. "Your oceans were our greatest success. Such diversity, such resilience. It's why we've returned now that our home world's waters are failing." The pressure increased as they went deeper, but the membrane around Finn adjusted automatically. Strange structures began to emerge from the darkness, curved architecture that seemed to grow from the ocean floor itself, pulsing with the same bioluminescent patterns as Naira's skin. "The research outpost," she announced, leading him toward what appeared to be an organic airlock. "It's not much, but it should dash." Her thought cut off abruptly as a massive shape moved above them, blocking out even the faint light from the surface. The water vibrated with a low-frequency pulse that Finn felt in his bones. "Enforcement vessel," Naira's mental voice was tight with tension. "They're scanning for us. Quick, inside." They slipped through the airlock into a chamber that seemed to breathe, walls contracting and expanding to cycle out the water. When it finished, Finn found himself in a space that defied his understanding of architecture. Everything was organic, alive in some way, with corridors that branched like blood vessels and panels that rippled with information in patterns of light. "Welcome to my temporary home," Naira said aloud, her form shifting back to its more humanoid appearance, though her skin retained some transparency. "We should be safe here temporarily, but we need to plan our next move carefully." "Which is what, exactly?" Finn asked, still taking in the alien yet somehow familiar environment. "We can't hide down here forever." "No," she agreed, moving to what appeared to be a control center. "But we can gather evidence. Proof that coexistence is possible. The bond enforcement specialists operate on strict protocols. If we can demonstrate that our cultural exchange has led to mutual benefit rather than contamination." She trailed off as multiple displays activated around them, showing various ocean depths and the life within them. "Your research," she said suddenly, turning to him. "You've been documenting the changes in marine ecosystems, haven't you? Changes caused by our presence?" "Yes, but I didn't know what was causing them." Finn moved to study the displays, his scientific mind already correlating his observations with this new data. The increased biodiversity, the new species appearances, the unusual bioluminescent patterns, it was all your influence? "Careful preparation for potential cohabitation," she confirmed. "But what we didn't expect, what your research shows, is how Earth's native species have begun adapting to our presence. They're not just accepting the changes, they're thriving because of them." A deep rumble shook the outpost, and several displays flickered. Above them, something massive was disturbing the ocean currents. "They're starting a systematic search pattern," Naira said grimly. "We have perhaps 2 hours before they find us." She turned to Finn, her bioluminescent patterns pulsing rapidly. Help me compile the evidence. If we can prove that both our species would benefit from cooperation rather than colonization, we'd be protecting Earth's oceans and saving your people, Finn finished, already moving to interface his research data with her systems. Where do we start? Naira's expression softened, her natural bioluminescence creating patterns that seemed almost like a smile. We start with trust, she said, extending her still-webbed hand to him. The bond demands truth between us, but now I offer something my people rarely give, voluntary connection. Are you willing to see my world as I see it? To understand what's truly at stake? Finn took her hand without hesitation, and immediately his vision exploded with colors he'd never known existed, his mind filling with knowledge of depths he'd never imagined. In that moment of connection, he understood that he'd been right all along. The ocean's mysteries were far greater than humanity had ever dreamed, and its future might depend on what he and Naira discovered together in the next 2 hours. The mental connection with Naira felt like diving into an ocean made of pure knowledge. Memories and information flowed between them in waves of bioluminescent thought. Finn saw her world through her eyes, vast cities of living crystal suspended in purple-black waters, schools of her people swimming in complex formations that created symphonies of light and sound, the gradual dying of those same waters as their sun's radiation changed. Our oceans began failing 3 Earth centuries ago, Naira's thoughts merged with his. That's when we first came here, seeking hope in the waters we had once seeded with life. Through their connection, Finn felt her species' deep love for Earth's oceans, their pride in how their ancient experiments had flourished here. But he also sensed something she was trying to hide, a growing conflict between her duty and her feelings. The connection broke as another tremor shook the outpost. Warning lights pulsed along the organic walls. They're getting closer, Naira said, moving quickly to the control interface. The enforcement vessel is using sonic pulses to map the seafloor. They'll find us soon. Finn's mind was still reeling from the shared connection, but his scientific training kicked in. Your people communicate through bioluminescence and electromagnetic fields, right? Could we use that somehow? Create a distraction? Perhaps. Naira's patterns shifted thoughtfully. But any significant energy discharge would lead them straight to us. Unless. Finn pulled up his research data, overlaying it with the outpost's readings. Look at this. The local marine life isn't just adapting to your presence, they're mimicking your communication patterns. If we could trigger a mass bioluminescent event, it would create too much interference for their sensors to isolate our location, Naira finished, her eyes brightening. But triggering such a response would require a really strong emotional signal? Finn suggested, remembering how her bioluminescence intensified with feeling. Something that would resonate with the local sea life? Naira's patterns flickered with what might have been embarrassment. The strongest biological signals my species produces are mating calls. Ah. Finn felt his face grow warm. And I suppose those are pretty distinctive? Unmistakable, she confirmed. And given our current bond situation, attempting to broadcast such signals could be considered. A proposal? More like a declaration. Among my people, it would be seen as making our accidental bond official. Permanent. She wouldn't meet his eyes. It would also be considered a serious violation of protocol. Another tremor, stronger this time. A display showed the enforcement vessel methodically sweeping closer to their position, its sonic pulses growing more focused. How long until they find us? Finn asked. 30 minutes. Maybe less. And if they do? Naira's patterns dimmed. Best case scenario, I'm taken for judgment, my memories wiped, and Earth's oceans are declared off-limits for colonization. Worst case. She didn't need to finish. The image of dying oceans filled both their minds. Then we don't have a choice, Finn said. Whatever it takes to protect both our worlds. Naira finally looked at him, her bioluminescent patterns creating complex swirls of color. You understand what you're agreeing to? This wouldn't be just for show. The biological and emotional resonance required, it would create a genuine bond. Permanent by both my people's standards and your planet's natural laws. Finn thought about the wonders he'd seen in her memories, the potential for their species to help each other, the way her presence made him feel more connected to the oceans he'd spent his life studying. I understand. Her patterns brightened. There's something else you should know. When two of my people bond, they gain the ability to share certain traits. Over time, you might begin to develop some of our characteristics. Bioluminescence. Enhanced underwater abilities. The changes would be irreversible. You mean I'd become like you? Partially. A hybrid. It's never been attempted with a human before. The effects are unpredictable. Another blast from the enforcement vessel rocked the outpost. Warning lights pulsed urgently along the walls. 20 minutes, Naira said quietly. Once we begin, there's no going back. Are you absolutely certain? Finn stepped closer to her, watching the patterns of light dance beneath her translucent skin. You know what's funny? I've spent my whole life feeling more comfortable in the ocean than on land. Maybe this is why. He took her hand, watching as his touch created new patterns in her bioluminescence. I'm certain. Naira's free hand came up to touch his face, and where their skin met, Finn felt a tingling sensation. Then let me show you how my people express love. She began to glow, patterns of light spreading from her core in waves of impossible color. The sensation of connection returned, stronger than before, and Finn felt himself responding, his own skin beginning to shimmer faintly. Around the outpost, the sea life reacted, thousands of bioluminescent creatures adding their light to the display. As their minds merged again, Finn heard Naira's voice, filled with wonder, the bond, it's already changing you. Ready? Above them, the enforcement vessel's sensors went wild as the ocean itself began to sing with light and love. The ocean blazed with living light. Every creature within a kilometer had joined their bioluminescent chorus, creating a symphony of color that pulsed outward in ever-expanding waves. Through their deepening mental connection, Finn could feel Naira's amazement at the response. This is unprecedented, her thoughts echoed in his mind. The marine life, they're not just mimicking our patterns, they're enhancing them. Creating harmonies we never imagined possible. Finn felt it too. His newly awakening bioluminescent abilities let him sense the complex layers of communication flowing through the water. Schools of deep-sea fish moved in formations that amplified their shared signal. Colonies of coral pulsed in rhythm with their combined heartbeats. Even the smallest plankton contributed their microscopic lights to the growing chorus. The enforcement vessel's sensors must be completely overwhelmed, he thought back to her. Not just overwhelmed, Naira replied, her patterns shifting with sudden excitement. Look! Through the outpost's displays, they watched as the massive ship above them struggled to maintain its position. The concentrated bioluminescent energy was interfering with its bioorganic systems, forcing it to surface or risk losing control entirely. But their victory was short-lived. As the enforcement vessel retreated, new alerts flashed across the displays. 3 smaller ships had detached from the main vessel, their designs clearly built for deep-water pursuit. Hunter units, Naira's thoughts carried a spike of fear. They don't need complex sensors. They'll track us by sight alone. As if to confirm her words, a focused beam of harsh white light pierced the darkness outside their outpost, sweeping methodically through the bioluminescent cloud their bond had created. We need to move, Finn said, already feeling more comfortable communicating through thoughts and light patterns than spoken words. The research data. Downloaded and secured, Naira confirmed, her hand finding his. Where their skin met, their individual light patterns merged and strengthened. But there's something else we need to do first. She led him to what appeared to be the outpost's core, where a cluster of crystalline structures pulsed with stored energy. This facility contains generations of research data on Earth's oceans. If the enforcement units reach it, they'll destroy everything to maintain protocol. Unless what? Unless we merge it with you. Her patterns swirled with concern. The changes you're experiencing from our bond, they've created pathways in your biology similar to our data storage systems. Theoretically, you could carry the research within your own cellular structure. Like organic data encryption, Finn said, understanding flowing through their connection. They couldn't destroy the evidence without destroying me, which would violate their own protocols about preserving bonded pairs. Yes, but the process would accelerate the hybrid transformation. The changes would be extreme, permanent. Another harsh beam of light swept past their windows. The hunter units were getting closer. Do it, Finn said without hesitation. Naira pressed her hand to the crystal cluster, then to Finn's chest. The effect was immediate and overwhelming. Information flooded through him like a digital tsunami, centuries of research, marine biology far beyond human understanding, the complete history of Naira's people's interaction with Earth's oceans. His skin became more translucent, internal organs shifting to accommodate his new hybrid nature. Gills formed along his neck, and his eyes adapted to see spectrums of light he never knew existed. When it was done, he felt both more and less human, a bridge between species, carrying the future of two worlds in his transformed DNA. Beautiful, Naira whispered, both in his mind and aloud, her patterns matching his newly formed ones in perfect harmony. The moment was shattered by the sound of cutting beams. The hunter units had found them. Time to swim, Finn said, his new instincts already calculating currents and pressure gradients. I know where we need to go. They slipped out of the outpost through an emergency port, just as the hunter units breached the main entrance. The stored knowledge inside Finn guided them deeper, toward an underwater volcanic vent that his new senses told him would hide their energy signatures. The hunters followed, their harsh beams slicing through the dark water. But Finn and Naira had the advantage, their shared bioluminescence matched the natural patterns of deep-sea life, making them nearly invisible among the clouds of illuminated marine creatures that still swirled in response to their bond. They were almost to the volcanic vent when a fourth ship appeared, dropping down from above to cut off their escape. This one was different, smaller, more elegant, its design clearly meant for diplomacy rather than pursuit. A voice echoed through the water, carried on frequencies only Naira's people could perceive. Specialist Naira, by the authority of the High Council, you are ordered to surface for immediate consultation. Naira's patterns flickered with surprise. That's Counselor Vex, she's head of xenobiological research. Why would she? The answer came through Finn's newly enhanced senses as he processed the stored data within him. The research, he broadcast on the same frequency. Your people have been looking for exactly this, proof that your genetic influence could create sustainable hybrid ecosystems. We're not just carrying the evidence. We are the evidence. Understanding flowed between them. Their bond hadn't just changed them, it had demonstrated the possibility of true symbiosis between their species. The enforcement units had been following outdated protocols, while the High Council, seeing the success of their merger, had sent someone with the authority to adapt those protocols. Holding hands, their combined bioluminescence creating patterns of unprecedented complexity, Finn and Naira swam up to meet their future. Around them, the ocean continued to glow with possibility, two worlds becoming one in an endless dance of light and life. Through their bond, they shared a single thought: this was just the beginning. Earth's oceans would not only survive but thrive, becoming home to wonders neither species could have imagined alone. And somewhere in the deep, dark waters, new patterns of light were already beginning to form, telling the story of how love between two different beings had changed the destiny of two worlds.